Cassandra. I've really enjoyed this debate so far. It's been cool debating this issue with you and talking to you about all the issues involved with Guantanamo Bay. Um, I enjoyed cross examining with you, and I do have my first affirmative rebuttal for you today. So, just to get into it, I'll get started right away. The first point that you made, that you emphasized, was statistics about Americans that have been killed in terrorist attacks since 2001. So you argued that 139 Americans have been killed, and then you included the 2,996 from September 11th, 2001. Um, I think that those numbers that you stated and the way you stated it is not exactly fair because of the fact that um, there's no saying that something like that is going to happen again. You argue that we should keep the people in Guantanamo Bay because of these murder rates and these murder numbers. However, there's no relation to keeping them in there and saying that if they come out, something like this is going to happen again. I think that's a pretty far stretch on the link. I also want to note that this is from the U.S. Department of Crime and Statistics, that 16,238 people are murdered in the United States each year. So just doing math based off that same time frame, there's been 243,570 murders compared to the just over 3,000 that have died from terrorist attacks. So I think that holding these prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, like you've argued, is extremely unfair as it's almost 200 times the amount of murders happen in the United States each year. Your second argument, moving on, or not your second full argument, but you did point out, you referenced the death penalty. I would like to note that I don't think that's topical and I don't think that's related at all to this debate we're having. All right, your next point that you stated was that you say that my argument was that the prisoners are held and some of them may not be guilty. We're not sure, but the fact is that they don't have trials and they don't have an opportunity to go through a trial like Americans do. Um, your argument to this was, of course, they've been tried and convicted. You did have an article with a quote. I'm not exactly sure what article you read because there's many stories online and little examples of people who have been kept against their will and have not been tried. One example of this in an article titled 11 Years in Great Britain in 11 Years in Guantanamo Bay Without Trial or Charges, written May 31st, 2013 by Phil Hirschkopf. It tells a specific story of inmate 239. You can look it up. He's the only inmate 239. His name is Shakur Amar. He was captured by the U.S. and still has not been given a trial in 11 years, and he is still held captive in Guantanamo Bay. So that's just one perfect example to prove that my point was correct and your point was not correct. The next point you made, you did state that if upon release of Guantanamo Bay, hundreds of thousands of innocent people could be affected. I think that that really has no evidence to it. There's no link between those 2 points that you made. Um, saying that, oh, if we release these people, then hundreds of thousands of people could die or be affected. I think that you need more evidence there because there's really just no connection that I see according to the debate we've been having. Another point you made was that if Guantanamo Bay has been running for 12 years, um, why should we just shut it down? I think that that also has a lot of flaws in it. One example I can think of is slavery. Slavery was around for 245 years. Using your same logic there, um, if we should just kept slavery around because it was going on for 245 years and nothing was going, everything was going okay, so why would we change it? So I think that obviously positive changes are necessary when required, and this would 100% be a positive change to shut down Guantanamo Bay. You did point out that you thought that in the circumstance of they should be tried and convicted, that they should be judged by the same criteria as criminals in the United States, which I 100% agree with. However, you also made a point that they've committed such heinous crimes that they don't deserve the same rights as U.S. citizens. So I'm a little bit confused there. You think they should be judged by the same standard, yet treated more harshly? I'm just a little bit confused there. Like we pointed out, it does cost $2.7 million a year to house an inmate at Guantanamo Bay, as opposed to the $78,000 as a U.S. inmate. I believe they should be tried just like you pointed out, compared to other U.S. criminals, but they should also be given the 8 by 10 cell, and they should be given the health care and the mental care that the same that the U.S. prisoners get as well. And finally, the last point you made that I'd like to point out was you stated that Guantanamo Bay is not used as propaganda. I'd like to point out in an article called Guantanamo Bay, a terrorist propaganda tool, it states multiple high powered authority figures, such as George Bush and President Obama, all mentioning that it is a problem because it is used as terrorist propaganda. George Bush wrote the detention facility had become a propaganda tool for our enemies and a distraction for our allies. And Obama agrees by saying it's used by terrorists around the world to help recruit jihadists. So you have two different people who are leaders in our country, extremely different mindsets. You have a Republican in George Bush and a Democrat and President Obama, and they're both agreeing that this is used as propaganda. Also, if you just type in Guantanamo Bay propaganda on the internet, you can click Google Images, and there's literal posts and ads from jihadist groups about recruiting people for it. So, other than that, I've really enjoyed this debate, and I can't wait to hear back from you soon. Thank you.